Welcome, Bronco Nation. This very exciting series. I got Ron Counts on today, and we're going to be discussing a little series I'm liking to call 10 and 10, where we're going to be covering the top 10 questions facing Boise State football in 10 separate, right about 10-minute segments. I'm, of course, Bronco Blameyer. With me today is Ron Counts from the Idaho Statesman. For great Boise State coverage all season long, make sure that you follow Ron. Make sure you follow Idaho Statesman on Twitter. Make sure that you subscribe to my channel, of course. And then Ron is also going to be writing an accompanying article with each of these videos, going a little bit more in depth about what we discussed today. So make sure that you go and subscribe to the Idaho Statesman as well, so you don't miss out on any of that great content. Thank you all for being here, and let's get to the questions. All right, so the first three questions that have been part of this preview have been looking at the offense. The next two are going to be looking specifically here at the defense. Today, we're going to be looking at who will replace Matlock as the unquestioned leader on the defense for Boise State. It is a depleted defense that Boise State faces this year. You got Matlock, Noah, Jones, Skinner, just to name a few off the top that aren't coming back. 7 out of the top 12 tacklers on the team are gone. Avalos' recruiting is going to be tested this year because a lot of those guys that were on the team prior are guys that were brought in by Harsin. And now you're looking at a defense that is being made up primarily of the guys that Avalos himself has gone on the recruiting trail and brought into Boise State. So who is going to be that guy that takes over for Boise State? You know, Boise State's always had that top guy on the defense that's been the energy leader for them. It's typically been somewhere between the defensive line and the linebacker core. You're looking, just rounding off a few names: Matlock, Weaver, Vandresh, Dreyer, Lawrence, Venable. These are just some of the names that guys have gone before. Mr. Venable coming on my channel here in a couple of weeks, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But who do you think takes over from Matlock, and what is entailed in taking over from him? It's not just a position, it's also what he brought to the team. So can you talk a little bit about that and who you think maybe takes over for Matlock as the unquestioned leader on the defense here?
You're absolutely right. It's not as simple as replacing what he did on the field, because Scott Matlock, he has so many intangibles. I mean, Scott Matlock is Boise State. He's a blue-collar guy. He grew up in Homedale. He overcame a lot of tragedy in his young life, and he grew into himself at Boise State. When he first got there in 2018, he was so quiet. He never said a word. No one heard from him. Then he got on the field a little bit the next year. Then in 2020, he just burst onto the scene. He never left the field. He led the team with 7 sacks that year. And the last couple of years, he's been that guy. He's been that energy barometer. He's been that vocal leader, that guy that takes on double teams with a smile and just fights through him. So it's not going to be easy to replace him. But there is some options here. So the first 2 names I'm going to look at are a couple of veterans. 6-year senior DJ Schramm. Really, one of the most impressive players from last year, in my opinion. Last year was his first year starting. He was a 5th-year senior, first year starting, and he came in and just played like a wrecking ball. The way he ran sideline to sideline, the way he tracked the ball and made tackles was so impressive. He led the team with 110 tackles and 12 tackles for loss. Great player. He's not the same vocal leader that Matlock was. I think he's more of a lead by example type of guy, but especially on defense, especially when you're a linebacker, that can be really effective. And then another veteran that I think has a chance is Dimitri Washington, another 6-year senior, a guy who's beloved by his teammates. He's undergone a lot of injury issues. He missed almost all of 2020 with a knee injury. He was banged up again last year, but he's still tied for the team high with 4.5 sacks last year. And Dimitri plays such an important position at Boise State. Think about all the high-profile names that have played edge, or what was called stud at Boise State. DeMarcus Lawrence, Curtis Weaver, Shane McClellan, all these guys played that position and they made it famous. So any guy in that position is going to be in the spotlight. And Dimitri is just one of those guys he's just cool and calm and collected and confident in himself. So I think I can definitely see him putting together some pretty rousing locker room speeches. And then the third name I have is a young guy. This is the guy that every player I talk to loves him. They say he never has a bad day. He's always got a smile on his face, and that's Rodney Robinson, the safety. He's a diminutive guy. He's only 5'9", 5'10", but that kid plays his tail off, man. And he's got 16 starts in the last 2 years, 3 interceptions last year. He's got great ball skills. He's got great verbal communication skills. So will he be that guy this year? Maybe, maybe not. But going ahead next year and the year after that, I think Rodney Robinson is the man on this defense.
Well, when you look at those 3 names that you throw out there, the one that stands out to me the most is Dimitri Washington. Correct me if I'm wrong. Wasn't he a captain last year as well? I know he was banners outside the stadium for sure. but he was a focal point on the defense last year. And he's a guy that you talk about, a fifth-year guy. It's injuries have been what has held him back, but that has only allowed him to then focus on being that leader on the sideline. It's not a role that he seems to have shrunk back from at all. So when you're talking about who's going to take over, is he going to go and have the Matlock type stats that was put up on the field? Maybe not. I think he has that potential. I think he has that capability. If he can stay healthy throughout the whole season, if he can come into this year with some of the momentum from last year, I think that he can. He was really returning sack leader for this team, 4.5 sacks from last season. I think that he can potentially have one of those years. But regardless, when you're talking about personality, you mentioned some of that before, just a likable guy overall who's going to deliver some great speeches. I think that Dimitri Washington is probably that focal point. But there are some other great guys on this defense that maybe while they're not going to be the leaders on the field, energy-wise necessarily, or in the locker room, they are going to be able to potentially put up some great statistical performances. And a lot of these are newer faces. We mentioned some of those guys already, but some of the veterans already. But these are some of the younger potential that we haven't seen much from, but who maybe have a high ceiling this year. So I'm going to rattle off a few names. You can tell me what you think. But I'm looking at weak side linebacker Andrew Simpson, who looked exciting in his limited playing time last year, really came on strong towards the end of the season, regular season. Last 3 regular season games, he had 3 games with 5+ tackles. Versus Utah State, he had 10 tackles, 29 total, and 3 sacks on the season. He played a lot of energy. He was an exciting guy to watch out there. Edge Gabe Hunter, 19 tackles, 7 versus North Texas. He looked great in the bowl game. And then we got other new faces from this year, rattling off a few names. We got Max Stage from Germany. He's the #1 recruit in Germany, 6'5", 250 pounds, great tape as a D lineman. Some great transfers coming in from Iowa State. Howard Brown, 2 tackles last year, but he has some good stats too, 6'2", 312 pounds. NAU transfer defensive tackle Sheldon Newton. He's a senior, 65 total tackles in his time there at NAU. Utah edge Tyler Wedges, and then Boston College transfer defensive line Kevon Wright, who I've got a friend who's Boston College transfer, and he is hyped on this guy. He was really hyped as a recruit coming to Boston College. Didn't work out there, but maybe we'll hear at Boise State. Do you see any of these guys having a big year, a big statistical year? And then of the new faces, do you see anybody who might be that future leader for Boise State?
I do. So first of all, I'm a big Andrew Simpson fan. I think this is a guy that just has a knack for the ball, and he has a knack for rushing the passer, which is not something you always get from a middle linebacker. And Andrew, he's got the size, he's got the speed, and I think he has a chance to be one to maybe not lead the team in sacks, but one of the top sackers, if that's even a word, this year. And then you talk about Howard Brown and Tyler Weggis. So those are 2 that I want to talk about here. So Howard Brown from Iowa State, he's an interesting one because in terms of his size and his skill set, he's very similar to a Scott Matlock. He can play that 3 tech. He can, he'll be more of like a D end in this odd front scheme that they run. But he's a guy that's got some skill. He's got some experience. I'll be curious to see what he does. And Tyler Weggis, they got him listed as a D end. Obviously, in this system, D end and edge kind of can be interchangeable. I think he's a guy that looks the part for sure. In the spring game, he overpowered people. He looks strong. He looks big. So I think he's the guy that's going to come in and make some noise big time. Gabe Hunter is a really great athlete. I think he's going to be an interesting one to watch. It's just going to, with him, it's going to be how much playing time does he get? If Dimitri stays healthy, if Weggis produces, if Kevon Wright produces, is he going to get snaps? You really don't know. I wouldn't expect to see Max Stage this year. Physically, he's very impressive, but almost anytime you're recruiting from Europe, those guys are a little bit behind the American players. They're going to be very raw. I'd be surprised if he sees much playing time this year. As I look at the newcomers, as the transfers on the defensive front we're talking about, Tyler Weggis is the guy that I think is going to make the biggest impact. I think he comes in and starts right away. I think he has a chance to lead the team in sacks. I just think he's bigger and stronger. He looks like a defensive end. He looks like an NFL-bound player. So I think he's the guy that's going to have a big impact. And I'm curious about Sheldon Newton. I think Herbert Gums is going to be the starting nose tackle in this team, but you got to have a backup. You got to have a reliable backup at that position. And Sheldon Newton's got the size to do it. So, it's just going to be about can he produce and can he get, on the field with Herbert Gums there, because Herbert Gums is just such a freak athlete. If he's healthy, he's going to be on the field all the time. And another name that we haven't mentioned here yet, and this is kind of a young guy. He kind of broke onto the field some last year, but Ahmed Hassanin, he's a raw guy. He's only played football for 5, 6, 7 years, but man, that kid's athleticism is just off the charts. He's probably not going to start because Cortez Hogan's and Weggis are probably going to start on the line with whoever's the nose tackle. But Ahmed Hassanin is kind of that pass rushing specialist that you can bring in on third down, on second and long, and he's going to get there, man. Almost nobody can block him one-on-one. I mean, we're talking about a kid that in high school was nationally ranked in CrossFit at 250 pounds. I saw him. He sent me a video. He's almost 300 pounds now, and he can still do a muscle up. And for those who don't know what a muscle up is, it's a pull up, and then you lift the top half of your body over the bar. At 300 pounds, he's doing that. So this kid's athleticism is impressive. So I think he's one that has a really bright future and is going to really come on in the next couple of years.
Well, there are some great stars here on that front seven for Boise State. And the next video is going to be talking some of those back guys, those secondary players. That's exactly what we're talking about, is who will emerge as a star in the secondary for Boise State. Looking forward to that video. Make sure you guys like and subscribe to all the content mentioned in the intro so you don't miss out. This is going to be a great discussion for sure, just like the first four have been. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you like, subscribe. And as always, go Big Blue.